All right, folks, welcome back. This is the last video before the timeline of the war, and it's really just kind of wrap up. We've looked at the French and Indian War and how that basically drove Britain into massive debt, which would lead to them basically saying, we've got all these people living in the colonies that we can tax. Ultimately, this would lead to what we know today as the U.S. It was Sam Adams and Patrick Henry that would coin no taxation without representation. Rather ironic, as we really don't have the representation they wanted even today. We have people who have been in office for 30, 40 more years, who live lives of lavish luxury while telling us we need to tighten our belt. Barack Obama vacationed all over the world. Michelle took the girls all over the world, eating whatever they wanted. But we were to tighten our belt. At some point, you've made enough money, but Barack Obama needs millions. This is the attitude that spawned the American Revolution. The attitude of people who live lives of luxury and demand that we pay for that luxury. Very oddly, we have a president not taking a salary. Love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. The man has delivered on promises to bring businesses back to the U.S. The man has begun the construction of a wall on the southern border, which we badly do need. He has pointed out where state officials have badly bungled a response to a virus that honestly is no more deadly or dangerous than common cold or influenza. He has pardoned African Americans who were in jail for very little. And the Democrats are demanding that he is a racist, bigot, Nazi, because they can't prove he is. Very much what spawned the American Revolution. But with Adams and Henry, we saw the creation of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. Now, the Sons and Daughters of Liberty were basically America First people. They realized at the time, that if you purchase things, you were supporting England. This is not the modern Buy American where you can look at the back of a shirt and see Made in America or Made in Taiwan or Made in Mexico. This is where they were literally telling people to make their own clothing, to chop down trees and build their own homes, to do everything they could to avoid purchasing anything. Because even if it was locally produced in a business, it was taxed. And those taxes went to Britain. This would lead ultimately, though, to the Townshend Act of 1767, which really is just taxes on imports. But it did more than that. It allowed customs officials to enter any home or business to look for taxable goods that had not been taxed without a warrant. Very much what caused the Fourth Amendment, that you are secure in your home and persons and papers. It made tax collectors the most unpopular people possible in the colonies. Many of them fled back to England after being threatened, some with death. If someone is barging into your homes, I need to see that you paid tax on that. Did you pay tax on that and that and that? And taking your money when they say, well, I don't think you did. These are thieves, and they will run out of the colonies. It would lead just 3 years later to what is referred to as the Boston Massacre. At this point, the British had sent British units, the Redcoats, to the colonies to maintain order. In Boston, near the Customs House, this is very much still about imports and taxation. You have a group of colonists who are very unhappy, and they're throwing snowballs at the soldiers. It does escalate to rocks in some cases, and they are daring the Redcoats to fire on them. Ultimately, they do, and 5 people are killed. It's coined the Boston Massacre. But John Adams still argued that everyone involved, even the British soldiers, deserved a fair trial. This is the innocent until proven guilty. If you had 20 soldiers there, and only 5 of them fired, killing someone, because they were being goaded into it. Only those 5 were actually guilty. The other 15 were just there. And the colonists were just bayed for blood. And Adams was very much remaining in the, no, we have to remain the bigger person. You would get to 1773. Now, this is where the Tea Act had what it had cost. In the Tea Act, the British East India Trading Company was handed a monopoly on tea for the colonists. And at the time, still, granted, we'd been in the colonies for well over 150 years, almost. Well over 100. We're pushing 150. But to say that we are the only people who may sell this item that all of you want, pushed just too far. You had the Tea Party on the Boston Harbor, where colonists, disguised and under the cover of darkness, crept on board and ultimately threw 342 cases, chests of tea, into the harbor. It's become a joke that you'll see someone post how did the British make their tea, and it'll show the little electric kettle and a tea bag and some milk and lemon and all that. And that's how do Americans make their tea? Throw it in Boston Harbor. But this was a direct response to being told, you will only buy from us, and you will buy from us to give us your money. This would lead to the intolerable acts. Now, Boston Harbor was closed until the cost of those 342 chests was collected. Town meetings were almost universally banned. The Charter of Massachusetts was revoked. Massachusetts legislature was put under General Thomas Gage, virtually putting Boston under martial law. Royal officials could not be tried in colonial courts for anything. The Quartering Act literally said, we can take over your home to house our soldiers to subjugate you. The Quebec Act gave private land to Quebec. It was literally an overt move to assert control, and it had the absolute opposite effect. This is where we begin seeing Washington, Adams, Franklin, Jefferson, so many others finally getting the response that they were looking for when they pitched the Albany Plan, when they came to these colonies asking them to band together to assert our independence. This is what would lead to the Declaration, when in the course of human events, this is something that had not really been done. If we look at the other nation states on the planet, they were either indigenous people who had always been there. India, Japan and China, Russia, the Netherlands and Icelandic areas. But when you look at Europe, Spain, India, France, Austria, Germany, England, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, these are areas that Rome had expanded to and then left. These were not areas where people had been made to fight to become a country. These are areas that had been part of the Holy Roman Empire. And then Rome had left. They basically said, we don't need to be here anymore. You're on your own. When you don't fight for your own legitimacy, you don't respect the same as those who have. I've seen it where, someone is given pretty much everything, and it changes them. Oddly enough, that is exactly what people are screaming about still today. You have someone like Donald Trump who built his empire. He was not handed consequence-free the beginnings of that. It was a loan that he paid back, and he built a multi-billion-dollar real estate and construction empire in New York. Britain was handed the island when Rome left. What was Gallia? The Gauls were just said, we're leaving by the Romans. And it ultimately became Germany. Look at lottery winners who, it's literally rags to riches story, where you have someone who is living paycheck to paycheck and in phenomenal debt, and they all of a sudden have millions and millions of dollars. And more times than not, they end up broke within a year or two. They'll buy flashy cars and a gigantic house, and they'll travel all over the world, and when it's all gone, they're still in debt, sometimes even more. The attitude of, this was not something I had to work for. You can even see it in business still, where someone is the son or daughter of a high-ranking person in a company, and all of a sudden they're making 7 figures or high 6 figures without really the experience to justify the job they're in. That was the attitude of Britain. They were handed their country. The colonists abandoned Britain. They had to work to build up the colonies. They had to work to raise crops and raise animals, start businesses of their own. They eventually had to fight to protect it. Pardon me. This is the difference in attitude. That the colonists were looking at something they had built from the ground up, being told, still not yours. You're still my subjects. You're still going to do everything I tell you. And then you bring in the Boston Massacre. And then you bring in the Tea Act. Then you bring in the Stamp Act and the Declaratory Act, which is literally a tyrant saying, I didn't build any of this, but it's still mine. And you're just going to live with me taking everything I can from you. When you then have 5 people killed in Boston, it's a wonder that there was even one person, that being John Adams, that said, we're not going to act like Britain. Where Britain would have just executed every member of the group that had 5 people shot because they dared oppose the military. They would have just executed them. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Franklin. They all knew that if this push for autonomy did not work, they would hang as traitors. That the colonies would be subjugated exponentially more than they already were. It was a push and a fight every moment in the build-up and in the actual revolution. It was literally a life or death struggle. They knew this going in. They knew that if they failed, they would be killed as traitors going in. Literally had everything to lose, but also everything to gain, because they knew that should they succeed, they would have brought about a new nation that, unlike any other on the planet, was bought and paid for by the blood of those living there. Yes, the Britons near the end of Roman occupation did have to fight a little bit to pacify the island. Ultimately, they would ally with the natives there. Look at the movie King Arthur. It is a departure from the classic Arthurian legend of, a stable boy and a squire pulls a sword from a stone. It is Arthur as a Romanized Celt. And ultimately, he allies with the remaining Celts to fight off a Viking invasion. That's not fighting for your country, that's just fighting to push back invaders. This is people who are, at the beginning of their nation, already considered subjects of another nation that was expanding. I wonder that we haven't seen it in other places. We have seen revolution in Hong Kong, in India. Oddly enough, the one place you would think would have seen a rebellion, Australia, which began as a British penal colony, hasn't. But 240 odd years ago it did here in the colonies, and ultimately became the United States. It is a departure from what history has seen. And it would be the beginning of a new chapter. And that's where we'll pick up on the next video. Let me know what your thoughts are. As I said, I'm not just here to be agreed with and told you're so right. I want challenge, I want discussion, dissent, and debate, but be civil about it. We can discuss, dissent, debate, and disagree while remaining civil, and that is where we learn more than we do from reading books, because it forces us to read more and defend our stance against someone challenging our stance. Please remember to like and share the video so that we expand the channel and affect the algorithm, as well as make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you're aware of all videos. This is the only one on a schedule anymore. I did notice, and I'm going to be doing a review of it when I'm finally able to watch it. We know that 1984 was made into a movie in 1984. George Orwell famously just transposed the last two numbers of the year he wrote the book, 1948, into 1984 for the title. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, where the government controls everything you can use to learn about current events or history or anything. But there's one that has not been made yet, and that is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Literally a world where children are grown into castes. If a woman gets pregnant, she is required to get an abortion. Drugs, materialism, anything and everything. But again, the government controls everything. And I just saw a preview, an advertisement for Brave New World. One of the three, oddly enough, the three books that are part of the giveaway of 500, 1,000, and 1,500 subscribers. It's the only one that's not been made into any form of TV show, movie, or whatever until now. If I remember right, it's going to be on Peacock, which is NBC's streaming service, which I believe right now is free, but I'm hopefully going to be able to still find it free. And I've read the book multiple times, the same as I have with Fahrenheit 451 and with 1984. So I will be watching it, and I will be doing a review on it, because I am rather worried that it will glorify the have all the sex you want, no consequences. Take all the drugs you want, no consequences. Buy everything you want, no consequences world. I'm worried that it will glorify it in an attempt to basically tell the world, vote for tyrants, and once you give them power, they will give you utopia. And it never works out that way. But I don't know exactly when it's going to launch, and I'm not 100% sure it was Peacock, but I believe it was. So once I'm able to view it, I will be doing a review and a comparison to the source material of the book. Until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.